The Path of Exile 2 free weekend just gave a lot more people a reason to jump in, and with the full release getting closer, this is the perfect time to fix one of the things that can make the game look rougher than it should, the built-in upscalers. Today I'm going to compare native AA, NIS, FSR and XeSS, and then show you how I got FSR4 working through OptiScaler on RDNA 2 and RDNA 3 class GPUs, with some notes for older RTX cards that may be able to use the same DLSS input path depending on your setup. Quick warning before we start, Path of Exile 2 is an online game and OptiScaler is a community tool. I'm showing what worked in my testing, but you should always check the latest OptiScaler Discord notes, back up your files and use this at your own risk. Hey guys, welcome back to GeekJ, where we make tech tutorials and gaming simpler and better. First, we need a clean baseline, and the opening area is perfect for this because it has demanding lighting, shiny surfaces, motion, and a lot of little details that expose upscaler problems very quickly. Now, once we're in the game for the baseline, I am using DirectX 12 as the main renderer, and this is a Windows-based system, so that's, I believe, the majority of people that would play this game. We obviously go with a windowed full screen mode. VSync is staying off. Dynamic resolution must stay unchecked. My monitor's native resolution is 1080p. It's a high refresh rate monitor, so I'm gonna leave it at the native resolution. And for the first pass, we're gonna leave everything regarding the upscalers at the default settings, especially now that we have the NIS default, which is the default. I'm sorry. Set no upscale in the render resolution option over here, and for the sharpness slider, since we're not upscaling, we will leave at 0%. Now, if we scroll a little bit further down under the detail settings, starting with everything maxed out, because I am testing at 1080p on a high refresh rate display, so 1080p is not that extremely demanding if your target frame rate is 60 FPS. If you're dropping below 60 FPS after upscaling, the first setting I would lower is Shadow plus GI quality. In my testing, that is the biggest lever for performance without gutting the entire image. So yeah, instead of Ultra, which is the highest setting, you can go with high or low and see where your FPS stands on. Now, in advanced settings, I keep everything disabled except the engine multi-threading, which should be checked. And for the performance metrics, use whatever helps you monitor your setup. I'm using the Steam overlay, so I am turning the in-game metrics off completely to keep the screen as clean as possible. And basically now we have a consistent starting point, so let's look at what the built-in upscalers are actually doing. So yeah, we're starting with NIS at native resolution, and the first thing I notice, even on this cutscene thingy, is aliasing and a lot of shimmering, and unfortunately this is not going to improve, so I'm gonna go with the mouse over here. But yeah, already I can see the shimmering everywhere. As you can see, we are on native resolution. Let me just go back to the options over here so you don't think I am lying, because I was also thinking there's something wrong with this image over here. But yeah, there's no upscaling, we're not using dynamic resolution, and the dynamic culling is disabled, so there's no real reason for this, unfortunately. And a pretty cool test is walk through the, I guess, injured man's blood over here, and as you can see, the simmering is very prominent kind of everywhere on all the wet surfaces and stuff, but as you can see, that's not a very good showing. A lot of aliasing over here. It is playable, but those shiny surfaces in the opening area over here do not hold together very well, and the image has that crunchy crawling look that pulls your eyes away from the actual game. This is at least what is happening for me. And as you can see, we are hovering around 107, 106 FPS in this initial area. and we can go back to the shore over here and go back over here. So now if we go back into options, so you can see we have 77%. I wouldn't choose that because it's not quality, it's ultra quality. I would go with 67%, so let's go with that because it's 720p and it's the actual quality option. So if we save and close, things get ugly pretty fast, as you can see over here. We can try to, in quotes, fix this by applying some sharpness, but as you can see, even with 10% sharpness, which is pretty typical for quality, NIS looks unfortunately heavily aliased, pixelated, blurry at the same time, which is a very cursed combo, as you can see over here. Even if we scroll to zoom in or out, yeah, everything looks pretty bad. We do get a pretty big performance boost with averages at 163 FPS, I believe, as we can see over here. As always, disclaimer, I am recording with OBS with pretty high settings, so obviously this takes away some of our performance, but yeah, this is what we get, unfortunately. Even the outline of the character over here is, yeah, pretty aliased, looking pretty rough. If we go back into the settings and we go even lower, and let's go with 600p, which is basically performance mode, and we can directly try and amend this a little bit with 20% sharpness. You can see that this is, yeah, pretty bad. So even with 20% sharpness, we do get a lot more performance. So we are averaging around 192 FPS over here. The image falls apart completely, unfortunately. The shimmering is still here. The textures lose all definition basically, and if we zoom in, yeah, there's kind of nothing there, and I literally cannot imagine most people willingly choosing to play Path of Exile 2 like this unless they absolutely had to for some reason. So NIS gives us a baseline, but it is not where I would want to live the game. So let's go with the next app option or candidate, if you will. And this is going to be FSR. So we're going to select FSR over here and let's go with no upscaling and 0% on the sharpness slider over here. We're gonna save and close, and at native AA with sharpness at 0%, the image is much cleaner than NIS. Aliasing is controlled far better. The overall frame is calmer, and for a built-in FSR3.x, I don't know which exact version they are using, the implementation is honestly not bad. But yeah, the downside is that it is a bit heavier, not too much, like we were averaging 106 FPS, now we are at around 102, 103 FPS on average over here. The shiny areas are still shimmering, even though we are, again, on native AA. This is the option, but still we get shimmer in a lot of the reflective surfaces, let's say. And it does that more than I would like. So let's move to quality with 10% sharpness, as we did with the other NIS option we had before. So 10%, we're gonna save and close. And the performance uplift is nice, and the image still holds up really well. And you can see, yeah, the average is around 150 FPS compared to the 102 we had before on a native AA. And the only thing I notice over here is that the textures are softer and a little more aliasing here and there in some of the textures of the branches over here and stuff. I don't know if this is going to translate very well through the YouTube compression algorithm and all that stuff, but yeah, I can see even on the textures on the ground, it is losing like a bit of quality over here, but the shimmering is still there and it's getting a bit worse, unfortunately, and we have like a little blurry filter on top of everything. But yeah, the reflective surfaces show the most problems over here. Now let's go with performance mode over here. We're gonna go performance, not ultra performance, just to keep an apples to apples comparison over here. We're gonna go with save and then close. 20% sharpness, of course, and this is where I would personally stop. This is not a very good showing. We do have another performance uplift over here. You can see 188 FPS on average, but everything else is pretty harsh. We get ghosting in the image. The aliasing is not that terrible, but we do get that ghosting when we move, and when there is a lot of effects and particles on the screen, it's even worse. It gets very soft as an image. The texture detail is like not there anymore, and the late game effect spam is exactly where that lower internal resolution is going to hurt the vibe. It kind of destroys the game completely if you play like this. So the built-in FSR is usable, and it is clearly better than NIS here, but it still leaves room for a much cleaner image. And last for the built-in upscalers is XeSS. So let's go on ahead and select that until XeSS. We're gonna go with no upscale in the beginning. In my testing, XeSS has proven to be the heaviest of all of the built-in options, and even at native AA it starts off blurrier than I like, and I cannot change the sharpness slider, as you can see over here. And at first I thought this was an issue with the image quality selection over here, but even as I will demonstrate afterwards, even if we go to the other upscaling options, the sharpness slider stays disabled, unfortunately. And effects like fire and other stuff already start to look very, very soft. And if we go back to the login screen, I can demonstrate this with all of the other upscalers as well. And somehow the image still has aliasing with this for some reason. I don't know why. We also have shimmering in between the blurriness. It's kind of very, very weird. It's not a trade-off that we want. Like, if we get blurriness, why do we have more aliased surfaces and textures and everything? And we are at below 100 FPS averages. I think around 97 to 98 FPS is the average around here. And now if we go to quality mode, we have a lot of options with this upscaler, but let's just go with quality just to keep this as apples to apples as possible. And yeah, as you can see, the image becomes a lot blurrier, a lot more aliased. So if we go over here and we zoom in, you can see a lot of aliasing. Even if we're not zoomed in, you can see a lot of aliasing here at the roots of these trees, and the ground looks pretty horrible. Even on quality mode, it's like I smeared a thin layer of Vaseline over my screen. I don't know how else to describe this, but yeah, it's a lot more blurrier. The sharpness slider is disabled, as I mentioned before, with all the XeSS options, so we cannot tune our way out of it from the blurriness. I mean, from the in-game menus or options that we are given. We do have a 150 FPS average over here, so we are on par with the other options. Let's go with performance mode, and we're gonna save and close. This is still disabled. We cannot do anything with the sharpness slider, and yeah, this is kind of horrific. It pushes that softness even harder, unfortunately, and the effects suffer the most with XeSS for some reason. The textures look completely flat and they lose all of their detail over here, and the performance uplift is not that strong. Like, we're averaging 178 over here, while with the other upscalers we're really close to 200 FPS over here. So the visual quality is not enough to justify the hit, for me at least. I don't know if you guys like this smeary looking image over here, and we do get ghosting artifacts because of the heavy upscaling we're doing over here, but yeah, it's not an option I would choose willingly. And now if we just want for funsies, try something else, we can go with ultra performance over here just to see if we get a performance uplift. And now in ultra performance we are getting almost 200 FPS over here, but the image looks even worse. It's not doing bad because this is an INT8 upscaler, but yeah, it's not that great either. And we can do this with the other upscalers as well, just to see how they perform. We have ultra performance with FSR as well, the built-in FSR. So this looks worse than the XeSS option because this is not an INT8 upscaler, unfortunately. So the higher we go, yes, we do see higher numbers on the top left, but it's not worth it because everything looks horrific, and XeSS does show some strength over there. So now we know the problem: NIS is too rough, built-in FSR is decent, but shimmery, and XeSS is too soft for this game. And at least until we go to performance mode where everything kind of melds together, we still get shimmering and is a very aliased upscaling solution. So let's see if OptiScaler and FSR4 can do better. Now, before we exit out of the game or do anything or install anything, we need to set the game's upscale mode back to NIS default and set it to no upscale, no sharpness, no nothing. We're going to save our settings, close, and we're going to fully exit out of everything. So let me go on ahead and do that real quick. I'm going to go with NIS, which is the default. I'm going to go with no upscale, zero sharpness, leave everything else as we have it over here, ultra. Everything is off over here except for the multi-threading and stuff, and we're gonna close and exit out of the game. And that preparation basically gives OptiScaler a clean starting point and avoids mixing old settings with a new upscaler path or even crashes after we install OptiScaler. Now we need the latest OptiScaler build that matches this setup. And for this video, I'm using the direct manual install instead of OptiScaler client, because in my testing, the OptiScaler client version of installation was installing with spoofing enabled constantly, even when we had the OptiPatcher option. And that basically adds a bigger performance hit. I don't know if you're familiar with this. You can go through the documentation or, see what the guys are talking about on Discord. And we can use the upscalers even without spoofing our GPU, and this doesn't add that extra layer of emulation, so we get a lesser performance hit. So that means better performance in game for us. That might change by the time you watch this, so check the latest notes, but for this run I want the cleanest manual setup possible. So we're gonna go to the official OptiScaler GitHub or the official OptiScaler Discord, a link from that page. And I am using OptiScaler version 0.9.3 pre-2, which is at the time of filming found only at the developers Discord channel, because it includes recent FSR4 fixes to work with 007 First Lite. And it's not completely without issues, so they haven't released it on their official GitHub page, but you can find it through their Discord channel. And for all of these, I'm obviously gonna have links in the description below. So yeah, if we go to the Opti test builds to download the OptiScaler 0.9.3 pre-2 version, we can click on this little highlight over here and it will prompt us into this page where we can click this little button and download the latest version. Now we will also need the latest FSR4 INT8 4.0.2c package from the resources, and the resources light channel is the one we want. So the last message over here is the one we need, and if we go to the bottom where it says DLL re-uploads, you can see there's two messages and this is the one we need. FSR INT8 4.0.2c with RDNA2 fix, and we click on this little download button. Now, to make life easier, I usually extract OptiScaler into its own folder, and you will understand why in a little bit. So let me just go on ahead and do that. I'm gonna go with 7-zip and then extract to, and I will instruct it to create its own folder over here, so I don't have like a bunch of files. And then I will extract the FSR4.0.2c into the same folder and overwrite the existing file. So that gives me one prepared OptiScaler folder that I can just copy and paste into any game I am testing at that moment. So now we open our Path of Exile 2 installation folder. If you own it on Steam, just right-click the game and go to Manage and choose Browse Local Files, just like this basically. And once we are in the install folder, we're going to copy the contents of our prepared OptiScaler folder into the games folder. And I usually just Control-A to select everything, and then I deselect the things I know I will not need, like the setup for Linux, the licenses, and the README stuff over here. And then I will just right-click, copy, and then right-click and paste into my game folder, and then replace the files in destination. And then, as usual with the manual installation, we're going to run the setup_windows.bat file. And over here, just choose the options that match your hardware setup, especially your GPU, and the upscaler path you want to expose. Choose the XGI because we're running this game with the DirectX 12 API, and then press enter. As you can see, the installer is asking us if we're using NVIDIA or AMD Intel GPUs. Obviously, I'm on AMD hardware RDNA 2, so I'm going to go with 1 over here and press enter again. And then it is asking us if we're going to use DLSS inputs and all that good stuff. I'm going to say 1 for yes again and press enter. After it is done, it is instructing us to press any key to continue, so we're going to do exactly that. And basically, the installation part is done. Now we're going to launch Path of Exile 2 again. And if everything hooked correctly, you should see the OptiScaler pop up at the bottom left of the screen as we see over here. So let me load into the game and open the settings menu as we did before. And we should now have the DLSS option available under the upscale mode. So go over here, and as you can see, NVIDIA DLSS is not grayed out anymore, and we have access to it. Now we're going to set the image quality to NVIDIA DLAA, and we're going to save the settings and close. And then we're going to press the insert key on our keyboard, and the OptiScaler menu will pop up over here. Now over here in OptiScaler, we have to select the FSR3.x or 3.x/4, depending on your hardware. This might change, and we're going to hit the change upscaler button over here. And underneath over here where it says FFX settings, make sure you have FSR4.0.2c like me, and that this is selected from the drop down over here. Then we're just gonna save the settings and close out of this one. And this is like the part where this is one of the simplest manual installations ever, because once the files are in the right place, the actual setup is surprisingly quick. So now we load back into the game in the same opening area, and yeah, we can compare. As you can see, 103 FPS over here. So this is very, very comparable to the experience we had with the FSR3, I think, upscaler. And this is immediately cleaner. As you can see over here, the shimmer that was distracting on shiny surfaces is dramatically reduced, or I would say completely gone. I don't see any shimmering whatsoever, even if we zoom in completely over here. We are obviously on DLAA, but we'll see what happens next. Fine detail holds together much better. There is no aliasing, and the image is no longer soft, and that smeary look that made XeSS even on native AA hard to recommend is completely gone with FSR4. And yeah, at native output, performance is basically in the same class as the other native options, but the image quality is the real win in my opinion. Very, very stable image. I don't think there's any competition over here. Now let's switch to quality and that 10% sharpness that we have access to. We're gonna save and close. And this is basically the sweet spot for me. As you can see, we are hitting around 149 to 150 FPS on average, or 140 something, 41, 42 on average. The performance uplift is meaningful, but the actual image is very close to native, which is exactly what you want from a good upscaler. And this is where FSR4, even in this unofficial INT8 form, starts to feel like the right answer for Path of Exile 2. But yeah, the shimmering is not there. We have no aliasing whatsoever. The detail in the textures is still perfectly preserved. Like, I cannot perceive any difference over here. Yeah, and even if we zoom in or out, even over here at the branches where we experienced a lot of issues before, the image is still super stable, no complaints. Now, if we push this to performance mode and we set the sharpness to 20% as we did with the other upscalers, let's give it a second to switch. 20%, save, close. Let's make sure this is working through OptiScaler, and yeah, we're upscaling from 540p, so that is even lower than the NIS performance mode, which was the 56% mode, as you can see over here. Everything looks perfectly fine, and yeah, as always, I still have no words. We do get a performance hit. It's not that great, but it's on par with the Intel XeSS upscaler. As you can see over here, we are at around 178 FPS, 75, which is pretty insane. And the image still looks better than the built-in alternatives, not even at similar settings, even at lower settings. Or even higher settings. What the hell? This looks amazing. Like, the detail retention is crazy. That is insane. And the only catch is that FSR4 INT8 has diminishing returns the harder we push it, so performance mode is useful, but quality is where I would recommend to play. Especially on my setup, I can clearly do that and retain really good FPS. If my GPU can hold the frame rate I want, I usually go with quality and max out all the settings. Now, let's test it for science. We're gonna go with ultra performance because we do have this available over here. We're gonna leave the sharpness at 20%. Okay, it is working. Let's see. We are upscaling from 360p, so let's see how this translates in game, and it is still pretty much insane. As you can see, we are hitting almost 195 FPS on average. We can see 200 FPS only when we zoom in, so we don't see 200 if we don't zoom in over here. Oh no, we did go above 208 over there for a second, so that's pretty nice. Even though we're doing this for science, it's completely unexpected. Like, this is looking far better than any of the other options so far. We do see some weirdness on the floor when we're moving and stuff, but the characters are not aliased. Textures have held up a lot better, especially when we're not moving the character. Most of the detail is there. This is really great. This is an insane showing for the power of FSR4 INT8 and INT8 upscalers in general. But yeah, my recommendation is pretty simple, I believe. If you want the cleanest image, use FSR4 through OptiScaler at DLAA or native style output. But if you want the best balance, use FSR4 quality with around 10% sharpness. So if you need maximum FPS, try FSR performance with 20% sharpness, but only after lowering shadow plus GI quality. If you're still struggling and you still need more FPS to hit that, stable 60 or something, then go for performance, but I wouldn't recommend it otherwise. So usually just go with quality, 10% sharpness over here, And as you can see, I have the shadow plus GI quality set to ultra, which are the maximum settings over here. And then I save my setup and I close. And as you can see, I am hovering around 139-42 FPS in this pretty demanding opening area. And the game looks amazing. And as you can see, we're just upscaling from 720p to 1080p. So nothing that crazy. One more thing you could do if you want, and you think you're experiencing some input latency because of the upscaling, you can enable the NVIDIA Reflex, set it to on plus boost, and then save and close. And basically, if you press insert for visualization, you can see that it translates this to anti-lag 2 or something, but I don't know if this is gonna do anything, to be completely honest with you. So it doesn't crash the game for me. So test it out and see if that improves your gaming experience if you have that on. Hey guys, future GeekJ here. I just discovered something weird. So I've done everything that I usually do, and then I discovered something. So I'm in the Clearfell encampment, and as you can see over here, if I press insert on my keyboard, I have done the typical thing I usually do with DLSS via Streamline and chose XeFG as my frame generation output. And the thing is, even though I did that, usually if we go back into the game settings, this reveals a frame generation option in the game. This is what usually makes it visible to us, and we can select it if the game doesn't have any other frame generation technology other than DLSS frame generation or DLSS. And this game doesn't have that, as you can see over here. We do get the reflex for some reason, so we get latency reduction technology basically, but we don't get any frame generation options over here, as you can see. And I found that pretty weird because as you can see on the top left of the screen, I have the Steam overlay enabled over here. And if I go on ahead over here and I activate by checking the active checkbox over here and then save settings and close, this seems to be working for some reason. So I have set the frame rate limit to 162 frames per second, and we are hovering around 72. It does seem to work without any issue. And I have restarted, obviously, as you can see over here, and we don't get any of the yellow warning text that we need to restart the game for this to apply properly and all that stuff. So this is actually working in the game with XeFG, which is the XeSS or Intel frame generation solution, which I found works the best in this game as well. If you guys want to use any kind of frame generation, you can try this. It did work for me. I don't know why, but it does work. So even if I go over here now and I select DLAA, obviously we're gonna see a drop in our base frames per second, and as you can see, it does take some time to apply the first time, and we're coming back to kind of the same experience we had before. We are at a base frame rate of 66 to 68 frames per second in this very populated area, and we are generating a lot of frames. This is playing really smoothly. So yeah, just make sure that in your game settings you're in windowed full screen mode and VSync is off, as we talk about in this video, and this is gonna work pretty well. So yeah, have fun playing the game with frame generation as well. So yeah, back to past John. The built-in FSR implementation in Path of Exile 2 is not bad, but FSR4 makes the image calmer, sharper, and much easier to look at during motion. And for a game full of effects, loot, motion, and shiny chaos, that really matters. So if this helped you make Path of Exile 2 look cleaner while keeping your frame rate up and not destroying your performance, smash that like button, subscribe, hit that bell if you never want to miss a GeekJ video. If you want to take it further, consider joining the GeekJ squad for early access and exclusive perks, or drop a super thanks if you're feeling generous. Again, massive shout out to my channel architects Paris STR and Kostas Dari. You guys are and forever remain legends. Drop your GPU, your upscaler preset and your results in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I'm gonna see you in the next time. Bye bye. Bye. Bye.